like that of the threefold community, he saw how friendly people were and how warmly disposed they were to him and interested in what he had to say. In fact, I think Dan Dugan might be the first and the only person who's ever visited the threefold community who said it's a really friendly place. Nobody has experienced that. But it just shows the kind of company in which he must socialize if he can feel that. So he had a very, very wonderful time. I told him that we would be putting him up in a hotel. He said, I hope it's a nice place. I said, it's a great place. They charge by the hour. I really like it there very much, Dan. And it was very, very interesting. And as a result of that, I was fired from Sunbridge College. That's another story. The reality was Dan Dugan got 250 people on Friday night when he spoke. I got 210 people the next morning when I spoke. I mean, if you're running a teacher training institute and you want to attract people, who would your choice be? Me, 210 people, or Dan Dugan, 250? Sunbridge really wanted him to take over teacher training, but he wasn't interested. So there's been a court case, there's been all kinds of stuff. I mean, the poor schools in California, they've been dragged through the mud. They've spent tens of thousands of dollars on court matters and so on. They've had to, learn about the legal system, the local legal systems, the state legal system. He has just pulled them into the real world in a very, very big way. And I think that in a certain way, the Waldorf movement has been wounded. A kind of wound has been inflicted by his work. Now, he finally lost the court case, and that should be that. But I understand now he is back in action and said the judge was prejudiced, and probably a whole new procedure is going to start now. So he's not about to stop, and now he's gotten interested in YouTube to see all these Waldorf videos that are up there, and sends people off to comment on them, to make the old comments. So he's always kind of trying to get into the latest. I just bring this because in a certain way, this could have been, if not avoided, it certainly could have been mitigated if he had been taken seriously to begin with. But because there's such a strong Luciferic quality in Waldorf education, anything coming from the contrary direction is often not seen, not understood, not taken seriously. Let's talk about school finances, for example, how schools deal with money. Maybe let's not talk about that. Let's talk about something more pleasant. I just need to mention money. When I started in Green Meadow Waldorf School in the 1980s, the word salary, if it was mentioned by anybody, would elicit a hush. And that was the end of the conversation. You could not talk about salary. You could not mention benefits. You could not talk about money ever, ever. So this is very, very important. This is to the good that Waldorf schools are having to deal with the complications of the modern financial life. And many of those teachers who are getting on in years, I'm one of them, who would like to retire, cannot. They cannot retire because their school never provided pension for them, never provided medical insurance or anything. They could very well go into a life that would be below the poverty level after 25, 30 years or more of dedicated idealistic service to their school. So in many schools now, one finds maybe a quarter of the teachers really should be stepping down. They're really beyond, well beyond their prime. And I say this because I chose, the time had come in a way that I realized I'd be better off doing other things. But many do not feel they're in a position to do this. Now, 100 years ago, Andrew Carnegie, looking for ways to give away all of his vast fortune, asked the question, why are German universities so great and American universities so bad? And this went for Harvard and Yale and Princeton as well as all the others. The quality of American advanced education was very, very poor. So he had a team go and investigate colleges. This had never been done before. And their conclusion was, in Germany, the professors are given pensions. They're compelled to retire at age 65, and then the state supports them. In the United States, there's no pension fund, salaries are low, and therefore they can't afford to retire. So Carnegie then established a pension fund, which has become the largest pension annuity fund in the world, TIAA-CREF. That was begun by Andrew Carnegie as a way of getting those older professors out of the universities so young blood could arise. And then you see the 1920s, 30s, 40s, by the end of World War II, American universities were starting to set the standard for the world. Carnegie realized it was not an academic issue, it was above all an economic issue. And it was also an issue of people not necessarily being aware when the time had come for them to take another step. This is also true on a sort of administrative level for the Waldorf movement, because the Waldorf Schools Association tends to be very tightly, if not controlled, at least tightly looked after by the senior schools, the oldest schools, my old school among them, Kimberton among them, and others. So these are older schools, schools that are now 50, 60 years old and so on. Institutions, Steiner said, also have lifetimes. In fact, he said it would really be right for a corporation at age 72 to dissolve itself and give its assets over to a lot of smaller companies, which would then start an entirely new kind of corporate culture. Something really new would arise. Did he mean Waldorf schools in that as well? What would it be like if a Waldorf school at age 60, let's say, started to plan a way that it would dissolve itself and create perhaps 2 or 3 new schools in its stead? Smaller schools, schools more responsive to the needs of today, schools that didn't have such strong traditions and so on. I don't know. Schools tend to have very, very long lives, of course. In England, Waldorf schools are looked at as Johnny-come-latelys because there the schools go back to the early Middle Ages often. But it's a thought. This could be one of the aspects of Waldorf education in the United States that is making it so tired and slowing down its ability to respond quickly to the needs of our time. This is, I think, a very, very important issue. And along with this also is this question of how does anthroposophy live in the Waldorf school? And I want to, since this is sort of an anthroposophical lecture cycle, I want to perhaps speak a little bit more about that, place a greater emphasis on it. It's one of a whole number of issues, but in a certain way it's the nexus of them all. They all